Hi, John.
Hi, Bernie.
We meet again.
Hello.
You've had at least one meeting together today.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. You're going to get a book.
I've given my schedule. I bet I've had at least one meeting with 2/3 of the working group at some point today.
I bet you have.
The phone call, or it was a meeting, or yeah.
Yeah. You're going to get a book full of questions from all those folks at the last call you were on.
I
If
know.
that was the last call. I don't know if that was your last call, but
I saw there were like 121 comments in the chat. Although some of them were just like, I agree. So I was like, okay, good. Some of them will be not included. For all of you keeping track, I was just looking for some like October something to get my mind off of the sleet that has been falling around my house all day. And this day in history, in 1991, was game 3 of the World Series between the Minnesota Twins and Atlanta's team. The Twins did not win that one. However, we all know they did go on to win the World Series. So just so you know, if you want to just like, I just needed like a 5-minute brain break, which probably would have been in front of my device, but it was in front of my device. So I was like, I wonder when the Twins games were. So there you
did
go.
you say that was 91?
Yeah, that was the 91.
Yeah.
I should probably look up 87 too. Sure.
Yeah. I think 91 was the year that, or maybe it was 87. We weren't in town anyway. And my dad bought t-shirts for everybody. We got them in the mail.
Awesome.
He was very happy.
That's
So,
very exciting.
yeah.
Yeah. I have my little raggedy sweatshirt from 1987 still.
There were probably a few Homer hankies flying around.
Oh, totally. Yeah, exactly. I know back when it was like, I mean, now you get a hanky or, terrible towel or whatever they're called for every playoff run, right? For everything. Back then they were super coveted.
Mm-hmm. And I remember they were white, so they kind of, along with the dome was white. It was hard to see the ball.
Wasn't that, yeah, because wasn't that part of the problem for the opposing teams?
Sure.
Yeah. I wonder if the Star Tribune considers that like their very, very best marketing decision ever.
Right.
Like of all the things they do, right? I mean, they have that big thing in the fair and they do lots. I wonder if they're just like, yeah, that was pretty much the smartest thing we ever.
I could see that.
Yeah.
Or I wonder was hiring Sid Hartman for 50 years to write columns.
As a paper boy to start. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, no kidding.
That was interesting to read about his life. I think it was Sunday or Monday. They had a big in the A section, and I thought it was very interesting.
Yeah, really, there's not one corner of his life that wasn't pretty fascinating, right? And the things he saw in the newspaper industry and just the news industry in general. Yeah.
Okay. We'll wait just another minute to see who else shows here before we start the next thing.
Great.
while we wait, I'll bring up the agenda, but we're also going to have a couple polls as we talked about. We're going to try those out. I think we got most people here. Let's let a few more in. We're going to start by practicing with a couple polls. We're going to use a poll today. And first of all, welcome everyone. We'll use a poll feature to do some voting to see what people's opinions are about certain motions that are made. But we're going to start with a couple icebreakers just to try out the polling, make sure everybody is working for everyone. First one is, so it should come up on your screen, you just make a selection. So here it goes. So it's all about the snowfall this week. Everybody's got a feeling about it, positive or negative. So you can choose whichever one fits your description best.
We didn't get near as much snow down here in Rochester. So more rain.
All right.
We'll send some down next time.
Right.
We're in the banana belt down here. Leave us alone.
All right, I'm gonna end the polling. We got 3 people, it looks like, may not have voted, but that just means that somebody may not have chosen to. But I'm going to show the results so you can see. So let's just make sure everyone is seeing the results. If you're having trouble with that, just let me know, and then we can try to fix that for you.
Kathy mentioned in the chat that she didn't see the poll. So Kathy, do you see the results now? Okay, she's not seeing the results either.
Okay. Well, if we can't get that fixed, we can maybe have you vote through the chat, something like that. But you can see the agenda. It's odd that you can't see the poll. Well, we'll see how it goes, but we'll just have to grab your vote a different way, perhaps. Okay, I'm going to stop those results.
And kudos to everyone who cleared walkways.
Yeah, right.
For those of us who love walking our neighborhood, we appreciate you.
I did use the opportunity to test my snowblower out. I changed the paddles on the auger, and it works just like a new snowblower. It's amazing. It was throwing snow on top of my neighbor's roof. It was amazing. I'm going to do the next poll here just to practice again. We'll see what happens. So this one is on your work situation.
Say, Kathy, if you can hear me, are you working from your office and maybe your computer blocks pop-ups? Or if you're home, maybe you need to check your pop-up thing? Because this is a pop-up, and so it may be blocking pop-ups.
That's a really good point, Fred. She just said in the chat she's going to try her phone, and that
Right.
probably will eliminate that problem. So thank you. All right, I'm going to end this polling, and I'll share the results from that. And we have quite a few people that are working from home. But thank you for trying that and seeing how that worked for everybody. What we're going to do is I'm going to turn it over to the commissioner so she can just talk about, just remind us of the purpose of our meeting together again as we go forward today.
Yes, thank you so much. First, I actually want to just remark a little bit on there are 24 members of the working group, and we have met 20 times. And that originally was not, that's actually just us meeting 20 times. A number of you who worked in subcommittees or subgroups met even more than that. And so I want to just thank everybody for the amount of time. I am incredibly grateful to that. And when I think last September and our work to launch this, we did not know that we would need to finish this work amidst a pandemic. Mm-hmm. And as you've heard me mention a couple times before, we did postpone our meeting in March as all of us across the state were transitioning into safer environments because of the pandemic. And then, my goodness, people just came back in April and got right back to work and rolled up sleeves and said that, had really concerted conversations about the sort of pressure points we identified last September and October, still being pressure points, and this being long-term work. Nobody came to this table for any quick fixes. Nobody came to this table for, kind of like, sort of like overnight solutions. Everybody came to this table to talk about what sort of deep longitudinal work we may need to do. We may need to examine in our school finance system, and we may need to address in our school finance system in order to really work. And so when I think back to September of 2019, and I think the original charge that you were all invited to come to the table with was to address education funding issues with the help of Minnesotans who work with our schools every day, and to make sure that all perspectives are represented, to focus on carefully and thoughtfully reviewing key funding streams, identifying school finance reform options, and seeking consensus on recommendations for a systemic change that will improve the adequacy and stability of pre-K through 12 education funding, prioritize equity, simplify education funding, preserve local control, and close the achievement gap. And again, we didn't even let a pandemic stop us. It shifted us from being in person. And I'm really grateful for all of you working through the time on WebEx as we tried to get WebEx to work, our time transitioning to Zoom. You kept that purpose in mind, and you kept coming back to that purpose and the expectation that we were here for longitudinal work alongside each other and discussions alongside each other. And I'm really grateful for that. And I'm really excited, actually, that the next portion of the agenda is actually a historical context to give you an idea of where your work sits in the history and some of the history, recent history of school finance reform. And so thanks, John, letting me launch things off.
Thank you, Commissioner. And as you're seeing the agenda, because I will be moving off of that, you'll see we'll see that historical context as the Commissioner just talked about. We'll also just have some review of what the results of the ballot were, and we'll have some discussion about that in two different parts, as you can see on the agenda. And we have a lot of time set aside there. We may not need all that time. I don't think anybody would complain if we got done early, of course, but I think we have plenty of time to discuss those things and get people's opinions on those. So does anybody have any questions about the agenda or how we're going forward? So Tom Melcher is going to cover the next section on the historical context.
Thank you, John, and good evening, everybody. I was asked to provide just a quick historical context on previous
I have a quick
finance
question.
working.
So
And-
everyone, I changed my topic. So for mine, I'm thinking of like who's going to be against increasing graduation rates,
Oh,
or is it
Janie?
more who's
Janie?
not willing to act?
Janie?
Janie,
Is that
I'm just going to mute Janie, I think, because I think she's probably on another call at the same time. All right.
So this is Tom again, and I'm just going to provide a quick historical context on other school finance working groups that we've had over the last 10 years. I've worked on 4 of them. John, next slide, please. So the first one was a working group that was established by Commissioner Brenda Cassellius early in the Dayton administration. It was a comprehensive look at our school finance system, similar to our current working group. The working group made recommendations on a wide variety of school finance issues, including early learning, basic general ed funding, referendum levies, compensatory revenue, special ed funding, regional cost adjustments, and simplification of funding formulas. The structure of the report was to lay out the recommendations first. There was an addendum at the back of the report, which included discussion of some policy issues that affect school finance that came up during the committee's deliberations. The committee thought those were important issues and should be conveyed to the readers of the report. However, they were outside of the school finance charge to the committee, and so they were just identified as integration, poverty, accountability, and then how the school finance system might interact with those. So that there was not specific recommendations on those areas. On this particular report, there was just a report from the committee. There were no separate minority reports. Next slide, please, John. The second school finance working group that we had in the last 10 years was specifically charged with looking at integration funding. It was a task force that was established by the 2011 legislature at a time when the existing integration formula had been repealed by the legislature. So they were looking for new and innovative ways to address achievement and integration. There were 6 members appointed by the governor, 6 members appointed by the House and Senate, which were both controlled by the Republicans at the time. So it was a little bit more partisan with the appointment by the Democratic governor and the Republican legislature at the time. This was specifically focused on how best to allocate funds that had previously gone out through the integration formula to achieve improved educational outcomes for all students. And the recommendations focused on establishing the Achievement and Integration Program, which was subsequently enacted by the legislature. This report did include 2 minority reports by members of the working group that were included as an appendix to the final report. Next slide, please. The third working group was a reconvening of the first. So the conditions changed quite a bit between 2011 and 2012. The economy was improving. The political environment was changing at the legislature. And so the commissioner reconvened, mostly the same members, I believe, from the 2011 working group. And they revisited and strengthened their original recommendations. They did have an other considerations section again at the end of the report that involved discussion of funding issues that were directly related to a policy, but again, the policy issues were viewed as being outside of the purview of the committee. And so, for example, adequacy of education funding was one of the issues. And back, if you go way back to 2004, there had been an earlier school finance study that tried to establish what the cost would be for an adequate education in the state of Minnesota. And that was deemed to be beyond the ability of this particular working group to look at. There were also policy issues relating to educator effectiveness, integration funding, poverty, and accountability. So again, there was a brief discussion of each of those issues, but it was explained that those were policy questions kind of beyond the scope of what the work was that this group had been charged to do. And there were no minority reports in this one as well. And finally, one more slide. So then in 2014, there was another working group that dealt specifically with school facilities funding. I think some of the issues that came out of the previous work group relating to school facilities held some interest for the legislature. The legislature established this in 2013, and the committee met and made its report in February of 2014. And this group recommended the establishment of long-term facility maintenance revenue, which was subsequently enacted by the legislature, as well as improving debt service equalization and improving some equalization and expansion of other facilities levies. This report was pretty much a consensus determination by the group. There were no minority reports and there were no kind of other considerations sections. So that's just a quick review of the last four working groups that I've been involved in dealing with similar topics.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Does anybody have any questions or additional comments about that history if you were part of it even? Okay. Excellent. So next on the agenda, as you can see, you're just going to get some context around the ballot. So eventually we'll look at the ballot results, but we just want to talk about how the ballots, just came in and how we looked at it, and just give them background so you understand how we're going forward on this. So our co-chairs, Sherry and Christine, we're going to talk on that.
Well, this is Christine. Sherry, I don't know if you want to go first or if you would like me to speak first.
Doesn't matter to me. I'll start by saying we had 20 members that voted of the 24 that the commissioner mentioned are on the group. And so the ballot information that you received included the information from those 20 members. So I'll just give you that context to start. Christine?
Sure, I'll just add, there's been a lot of conversation. I know I've had a lot of phone calls and other conversations with people about, what does it mean if I vote and if I don't vote, and where does this all go? And, one thing that I've just been saying, it's pretty clear there's no way our legislature, I'm sorry, this is me speaking, Christine Osorio, is going to take a couple $2 billion of new spending in education this year. So the way I try to put it into perspective is to think about this as, this is 2020. It's a point in time look at many different pressure points that exist in school funding in the state of Minnesota. This collection of research is basically a summary of many different pieces of work done by different subcommittees, as you all know, and have really kind of unpacked what's the current pressure point, how does it impact people in greater Minnesota, in the metro, in different kinds of demographic sizes of districts, and then what is kind of the big picture view of that pressure point and some recommendations that go with it. Dr. Melcher has been amazing. He is an amazing resource for us. And the fact that he has put together runs, and by runs, I mean run the numbers of every proposal that's come forward to show what the impact would be by every single school district, in some ways can freak everybody out because it feels like, oh my gosh, these are runs. This must be a final plan. It must be decided upon. It's not. It's just an extra layer of information that Dr. Melcher has been so graciously able to provide for us in our conversations. And so I know I've had some conversations about where is all this headed? What does it look like? What does it mean? And I'm just kind of framing it the way I see it. I see this as a point in time document, a really cool research project, if you will, of a bunch of different pressure points in the current state funding system in the state of Minnesota, predominantly prior to COVID-19, because a lot of the work was underway before then. And so I would just like to set the context that however the discussions about ballots go, the ballots are really about figuring out who among us feels strongly about endorsing that particular piece of content for this report. It's not necessarily that you don't believe in, it means you believe that you feel like endorsing it, putting your name behind it. But we also know that there's no way we're all going to vote and decide this one thing or this one thing. This is about giving the best information we possibly can to our current government leaders and to our elected legislature for policy recommendations, funding recommendations that they will then be moving forward with. It's just the way I see it. I know our commissioner has asked us to pull this together, and this is a report that's basically going to her, and from there she will decide how it goes next, whether it's to the governor. I imagine the governor first, and then the legislature, or how you have it. It's true these are public meetings. It's true these have all been broadcast live along the way, and that makes it even more, it feels even more intense what we're kind of talking through. But I'm just encouraging everybody to take a step back and recognize I love the context that we just got with Dr. Melcher. We are a point in time. This is a point in history, looking at the pressure points in the state of Minnesota, and particularly where we see inequality in our state funding, and where our state funding is not aligning to best prioritize the needs of our students and support the needs of our learners in Minnesota. And so I don't want to say take it all with a grain of salt, because that sounds like it diminishes the work, because it's not. It's incredibly good work and incredibly thorough work. But let's not overthink it to a point of being unable to act or provide our thoughts, opinions, and guidance to this. So I guess that's just my one little nugget of advice and the way I'm thinking about this in our work right now. So take it for what it's worth, but those are just some of my thoughts as we think about wrapping up this year-long work together. So
thank you, Christine. And we are now going to have Fred take us through the context on the ballots, the review of the document that you received, so that you can understand how it's laid out.
Well, thank you, Sherry.
I'll pull that ballot up and share that.
Okay. And now that John has it up, I want to thank all 20 members for clearly filling out your ballots and clearly labeling them. It was tedious, careful work to make sure they were all tallied, but it was clear, and I really appreciate that. And John pulled off all the comments into a separate document, and maybe John can share later whether that might go out Monday to everybody. I'm not sure, John. We haven't talked about that. But this ballot is ranked. This ranking is based on the percentage of strongly endorsed and endorsed percentage of those who voted. You can see in the far right-hand column, there are a number of items that people just left blank, which was to be expected. The next to that is a Likert score that's based on strongly endorsed gets 3 points, endorsed gets 2, endorsed with modifications 1, and not endorsed gets 0. That was secondary. It's only used to rank ballots that ended up with the equal percentage endorsed and not endorsed. The endorsed with modifications column was very interesting because I think Tom and I kind of expected that we'd get recommendations. Instead, it was more comments about whether more like lukewarm support, or some people actually wanted to go further than what was in the proposal. So it was hard to judge what was really meant with endorsed with modifications. And so that column was pretty much left out of the analysis. So the one with the highest percentage and the highest Likert score was career and tech equalization. I think because career and technical education is such a hot topic, and also just about everybody on the committee felt equalization of tax levies was a very important principle. So if you scroll through this, John, because people have this, at least the members have, I'd like to go down to number 30 there, 4 up from the bottom, or 5 up from the bottom. In early learning, it was very interesting. It was the only place where there were really 2 proposals given to the working group that expanded early learning, but were done in different ways. And so, as you can see on the second page, I don't want to go there now, each one had kind of a lower percentage. But when we looked at it, there were 5 people who either strongly endorsed or endorsed K4 and did not endorse Jumpstart. And the flip side. So 5 people endorsed increasing early learning, but not both plans, just one specific plan. So in discussion with the co-chairs last week, we decided to look at each of the ballots again and say if they endorsed or strongly endorsed one or the other, it was considered strongly endorsed or endorsed. And so with that look, and that little symbol between 6.4 and 6.5 was the closest I can find to or, and still fit it in square. That's expanding early learning, one or the other. The report then is agnostic as to which particular early learning proposal will go forward. And it was through discussion with the co-chairs this week that 80% was determined to be a cutoff. And one of the reasons for that is, first, 80% is 4/5 of the group. But as you can see in the not endorsed column, you start out with a whole bunch of zeros and then get to some ones and then to some 1s and 2s and then some 3s and 2s. And John, if you flip to the next page, please. You'll see everything from there on down is 4 or more. So that means 20% or more of our work group did not endorse. They did not want to put their name on it. As Christine said, it's a point in time. We're just 20 people who've spent a year looking at this. We're not God, but those 4 people, 4, 5, 6, 7 people did not want to endorse these topics. And so the commissioner's call was for clear consensus. Consensus is not quite unanimity, but very close agreement. And so the decision was to recommend to the working group that 80% be the cutoff between those items that are in the recommended group and the others are in reform options that need more development. They will be in the report. They're not in the appendix. They are clearly in the report as being considered, just not receiving sufficient consensus, but certainly needing more development because they do address important pressure points and equity issues in our education finance system. So that's the summary of the ballot, how the rank is laid out this way, and some of the discussion among the co-chairs this week about why it's presented to you in this way. So with that, I'll take questions on the specific ballot. I think questions on the decisions about 80% and how that was laid out, I'll defer to the co-chairs.
Yes, at this point, if anyone can unmute him or herself and ask a question, you can also use the chat. Or if you have other comments generally about the voting results.
What does it mean in terms of further development on those equity issues?
Well, the co-chairs and the commissioner may want to answer it, but my assumption is that there'll be more work either done by the department or as in one of those working groups, they put another working group together later. It just needs more work at some level. And I think that's a good question for the commissioner when we actually turn the report over to her. And maybe she wants to talk about that tonight. I'm not sure.
I can certainly offer, like, from my perspective, again, having participated in the 2011 School Finance Working Group, and then and the work there, recognizing, as you saw, thanks to Dr. Melcher, just a little bit of that history, seeing that there were times ideas came up at the table that people had a lot of energy around. They didn't get to the natural conclusion of the working group in the same shape as the rest of the ideas. And so Dr. Melcher gave you the idea of, like, the achievement and integration being an example, or bringing the working group back together after a time being another example. That really, historically at the Department of Education, these working group recommendations are iterations. They are that point in time, which I actually appreciate Superintendent Osorio framing for us, using that phrase. So I see them as things that in the history of working groups that also generated a lot of energy, enthusiasm, and deserving of continued conversation. That being said, I know, as someone who will receive this, I have the potential of receiving recommendations alongside that, and to Christine and Sherry's point, to also determine what the best continuation of those conversations could look like going forward.
And I think I will add, from the point of view of a work group member, that we all recognize that COVID and this constant virtual meetings really makes it difficult to have nuanced conversations and bring up little caveats and little hitchhike ideas. And so, some of these ideas, it's just the way it was. I mean, I think COVID has interfered to some degree with the conversations among us to really work through these ideas. And hence you have 4 or more people on this page who didn't feel part of that conversation, or didn't wish to go into the conversation, or couldn't go in the conversation to make any modifications. And so I think we have to recognize our context also.
I would also add that some of these pieces toward the bottom, there were overlap. There was overlap in other policy areas, other statute areas, and we needed more clarity on how that all wove together. And that seemed to come out in some of the comments that were made, that you'll see when those come out. So I think just more work on how they integrate with statutes that are out there and policies that are out there.
I guess I have a question. I mean, Fred, and hearing what you just said about, the folks that were not able to endorse these things on the last page, which, as you know, I'm pretty passionate about, and so are our teachers. You've heard from me all year about those kind of things. But I guess the question for me is, what does our group need in order to fully endorse racial equity? It's really important. And what research would be helpful to the benefits, of teachers of color? I mean, I can't believe I have to ask this question out loud, honestly. I think we all know that, and we believe in this, and benefits, of helping our support staff and making sure our ESPs are trained in special ed needs. I think that's a high priority. We know right now that our special ed students, unfortunately, with all the different learnings that are happening in our state, they're not really getting what they need. And nobody feels good about that. I know that. But, I guess I feel pretty strongly that it's better to do the right thing than to hit a deadline. And when I look at this, I feel some concern, because with all of the things, including the murder of George Floyd, which has brought equity to a huge right to the forefront, I think that we have a responsibility to make sure that things happen. And we've talked about big change happening in education. And if we're going to address the achievement gap, and if we're going to address equity around the state, no matter where you are, I think we need to have more of a conversation about how to make this happen. So.
Sorry, Bernie, I don't want to interrupt if you're not done. So this is.
Go ahead, Amy. Thank you.
Amy Nelson from Minnesota PTA. I really just want to piggyback on what Bernie was saying, because as the commissioner was giving our charge, I wrote down, things that she was talking about: systematic change, opportunity gap, and equity were three of the things in our charge. And looking at this, if you go by the 80% marker, there really isn't any systematic change in there. It's all changing the formula, but it's not looking at that deeper dig. And what Fred was saying about COVID and the difficulty meeting and all of that taken into account, I wonder how much of this is the rate rankings and endorsement is pandemic endorsement, in that mindset that, well, I can't give everything a strongly endorse or an endorse because of where we are. So therefore, things ended up being not endorsed because of that scarcity mindset. And I really, it goes back to one of our first meetings where, we need to ask for what we need. And we need to ask for what is important to all of our students. And, it's really disheartening for me to see community schools so low. I was appreciative of the pre-K explanation and putting those two together. So they ranked a little higher. But then, as a parent, I look at this and I say, yeah, this isn't good. This prioritization is one, to me, of scarcity and not of what do we need. So that's my 2 cents at this time. Thank you.
I'll just add. Go ahead.
If I could just jump in real quick. I want to say if I marked for the racial equity aid, if I put endorse with modification, I know I put a comment about how I would like those funds spent, but that was so they could have been strongly endorsed for modification. That wasn't an option. So I'm not sure if I'm the one who put endorse for modification, but if I am, I would have went strongly endorse. I just had a comment about how I would like to see those funds, how I would like to see those funds. So I don't know if I'm that vote, but if I am, I would like to change that.
And that's an interesting point too, because there might be something that we could have strongly endorsed, because I know I did something similar, Anthony, where, I endorsed something, I didn't strongly endorse it, but I asked for more than what was actually there. So that's an interesting aspect to bring in there as well. So thank you for lifting that
up. This is Jim Davney. I want to kind of contrast these results with the framing that Superintendent Osorio gave us at the beginning of this meeting, and where she talked about this report being a point in time. And the 80% cutoff and the kind of relegating all the equity provisions to kind of the kiddie table, I guess I describe it, I don't think meets the point in time where we're at right now. Maybe a year ago when we started convening, I might have understood it that way. I'm not sure. I would hope not, but we're certainly in a very different time. And I'm thinking of the Star Tribune story earlier this week about student activism and engagement around wanting more anti-racist policies and practices and curriculum and hiring structures and all of that in schools. And, if patience is not usually a characteristic attributed to high schoolers, so they're not going to wait around for us. And I've certainly observed the last few years in kind of a compressed fashion around gun violence, around racial equity, around other issues. The youth today that we usually say are, well, they're great. Aren't they great? They're going to be next, they're going to be future leaders. They're already doing it. Yeah. And they're already driving movements around climate change and the like. So I'm just concerned that we're not really meeting the moment, and we're not really achieving the goal, again, that Superintendent Osorio put out about supporting the needs of learners, when we're not recognizing the need for greater initiative around racial equity. And I don't know what's going to happen November 3rd. And given the counting legalities, November 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th in Minnesota. But I do know that a number of these issues that fell below the 80% threshold on have been priorities for the House majority. And so I'm not quite sure what the path is for this report. I imagine it goes to the commissioner, and then it goes to the governor, and then I'm never quite sure what happens in the governor's office, frankly. But something will happen, and it'll come to the legislature, and there might be some more challenge when it isn't fitting with at least the current House majority's priorities. So I've got some hesitation about what we may be deciding to do at this point with how we've prioritized the racial equity issues.
If I could add a little context, because I have had a lot of conversations with different people. And I think, first of all, there's nobody in this Zoom right now who's going to stick their neck out right now and speak up if they believe they've been painted into a corner that they are not about racial equity. So I can just tell you right now, the silence button just went down quick. I know, and I can only say this because so many people have called me and had individual conversations about it, that there's a lot of perspectives out there that the things they did endorse were about racial equity. And it's really more of, and I'm not arguing for or against actually any of these items, to be perfectly honest. In fact, I feel terrible in even saying this, but the day after the ballots were due, John called me up. He's like, Christine, are you going to submit a ballot? I spent so much time having conversations with people about all this stuff that I hadn't even submitted one myself, because I feel like what I've been learning in my conversations with many different members on this team, and there's a lot of people here, and I'll say it right now because I feel like it's part of my job to do so, who aren't going to stand up right now and say, I didn't go for line number 38 full service community schools. And because they're not going to want to be accused of not being about racial equity and social justice, which everybody, I can't think of anyone in this group who isn't about that. However, I do think there are people who have different ideas about how to go about that. One comment that came up to me, and I'm just being honest, right? I guess I get to be honest because I get to hear all these things people are telling me in my ear that they're not saying on this Zoom, because who wants to be called a racist, right? But one of the questions that came up a lot about full service community schools is, shouldn't that be more of a grant program? Is it really something that should be woven into the overall funding formula for the state? Because when you have that kind of a program, you have some schools that are the winners and many, many, many who don't get that funding and then don't get to be a part of it. And I'm not advocating for, I'm just giving you some perspectives. I think that there's been, a lot of different conversations about, the conversation, some of the conversations that came out of the racial equity group happened pretty late in the process. So we didn't have as many meeting conversations around them. And so I think that was part of probably some people's hesitations. I think a lot of people also felt that they had to rank. Sorry, I have like my dinner sitting here and I just realized my dog is grabbing it. Had to kind of they had to pick or choose. It wasn't like I could endorse all this, because there's no way the legislature is going to look at this and go, oh my gosh, really? You're going to ask for $2 billion? And there's a whole lot of other people in our group right here saying, yeah, let's ask for $2 billion. Why not? This is what we should be investing in our state. And so I think there's different perspectives in why people voted the way they did. But I guess I'm just going to challenge us to not make assumptions that people aren't about racial equity when they chose to vote a certain way, or that they don't believe in social justice. Because I do think there's a lot of probably legitimate, in their mind, reasons why people voted yes or no for certain things. And I think for many people, it came down to, I need to prioritize. I can't vote yes for everything, because then I might, it's the legislature's never going to listen to us, right? because they always talk about education. You guys always come with your hand out and you always ask for more money, but you never talk about how you're going to cut the budget, right? So I'm just giving you another perspective. And like I said, I was the one who forgot to vote. Like, I mean, John actually called me like, Christine, aren't you submitting a ballot? But I had a lot of conversations, different people calling me and being quite honest and open and candid in a way that maybe they won't feel comfortable doing in this environment, which is broadcast live on YouTube right now, by the way. Just putting it out there.
Thank you. And Kathy's asking about the hand raising. I do see your hand raised, and Janie's got her hand raised as well. So Kathy Erickson, if you want to go next.
Thank you. And thank you so much for the thoughtful comments so far. And I'm smiling right now because Bernie's on my screen, and I had the opportunity to visit with her personally. And I'm just going to share my perspective in that the title of this group was a school finance work group. I feel so honored to have been a part of this, but I came with the context and the framework of making school finance, the systems we have, more effective, more efficient, the ways that we can try to do more with what we have in our systems. And while I very respectfully had a great conversation with Bernie, my comments when she shared about the things that she was advocating for, to me, in my mind, were policy things and great new things. And this was, for me, about trying to keep within the scope. And I'm going back to the comments that Dr. Melcher made about the previous work groups and where these conversations should flourish, because we didn't have enough time. These came in right at the end. And I would love to see more comments and framework this based on what I thought the original intent was to talk about the school finance portions and how to make the equalizations work and well, the nerdy finance stuff that was what we were, some of us came to try to help and support. And so it did feel a little hurtful to have someone say that we didn't care, but I was trying to look at the scope of what I thought the work was and what things we should be working towards. And and thank you, Christine, for, I think, sharing that point of view that others, that this isn't about voting against any initiatives or equity or ideas, but it was about what was the scope of our work this as a group. And that's where I went to try to prioritize those things that were school finance related issues. And I hope and encourage continued conversations about new things and new policies and how to look through things through a different lens. But those were not, they're not formulas and they're not changing things. These are policy related things that seem a little bit of a different scope than where we originally started. So thanks for letting me share my comments.
Okay, Janie, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I think I'm actually one of only 2 people that is in a current classroom, and I see the finances every day play out in my school. And so I think to say that finance is just to stick to formula is, I understand that completely, but when we don't consider the finances, the policy that gets created are just unfunded mandates. And we get to positions where we have been in the past. Where people are trying to do more, but there's no money. And so using this time as this moment in time where we're battling a pandemic between racism and COVID, and saying we can also prioritize using funding mechanisms that racial equity, teacher loan forgiveness, or paid student teaching, which helps out teachers of color astronomically. I know 2 women who would love to be teachers, but they can't take time off and lose 4 or 5 months of unpaid work. And I'm getting like emotional, so I'll stop. But I think all these things that kind of fell to the list would be the most impactful for me in my classroom. Thank you.
And I'm going to just support Janie there real quick and just say, I mean, you all know this because you're all working in districts. We are losing teachers, we are losing ESPs because it is just so difficult today to do the work that everybody's trying to do. in the state that we're in with the pandemic. And I know that is not part of a finance conversation, but I am fearful. And I mean, I hope you all are too, because I'm really worried about what's happening for all of us right now, no matter what school we're in or where we are. So when we talk about the legislature won't be willing to support us financially, this is, again, I will start from where we started at the very beginning, when we started way back when, that we need to make sure that we are fighting hard collectively for our students, their families, our communities, our schools, and everybody. So I will get off my soapbox, but that's where I stand. And Kathy Erickson, still appreciate you. We'll still play golf sometime, but we differ, obviously.
I guess I don't think we should, anybody should question anybody's motives in how people voted. But when this started, I thought it was about equity in educational funding, not just in terms of formulas. And if we really are going to address the issues of our students, we need to look at the whole system, not just the way it existed, but the way we want it to exist. If we're going to change education and we're going to solve the issues of an opportunity gap and also providing the services that our kids need. We talk always about how schools are being put more and more responsibility on everybody in the school to do all kinds of things, social work and everything else. And yet we need to be saying there's got to be resources to do those things. And so to me, it's, there are some things on this second page that, are not the greatest priorities, but to me, racial equity aid, full service community schools, trauma incentive aid, those things that really focus on student, to me are incredible. I don't understand why, for example, racial equity aid is not combined with achievement integration aid, like we did on the two things on early childhood, because to me, those are connected so closely that we have to address the opportunity gaps for the students of color and American Indian students in our schools. So that's where I'm coming from.
Okay. If we go back to our agenda just to look at where we're at, we did kind of skip to the section between 6:10 and 6:45. If we go back to the 6 o'clock to 6:10 section, do we want to at least look at those items above 80% and just at least get where people are feeling about moving those forward, since they have a lot of consensus, and then we can get back to the second group on the second page that most of you have been talking about. Does that sound like a good move right now?
I'm sorry, John.
I think we need to go back and hear why people thought so strongly about those. I think we should ask people.
So Christine, what would your question be?
Oh, no, you were asking if we should go back and see how people are feeling about those 80% items. I just said, I think we should hear how people are feeling about those 80% items. That's just my suggestion.
So as we can see on this and how Fred was describing it, he talked about where we cut the line on this first page at 80%, and then the number of folks who did not endorse. So does anybody have any comments about this first page and how possibly we could move that forward just to be part of the report?
Yeah, thanks, John. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. I guess I'll just be, when I submitted my ballot, I was very supportive of things that were from all over the state, benefited folks all over. And I think we need to have a conversation as a group as to, what options we have to, if we're going to issue a minority report, if we're going to, do those sorts of things before I would want to proceed on whether or not there's a consensus, because I, went in with a voting in a certain mindset and coming to see like others were not in a similar place. And so I would not want to know what our options are before we start saying if there's a consensus around things, because I think that would change my calculus.
I think, Sean, you bring up a good point, and I think we need to look to the commissioner to see, I guess, what would be most helpful. I mean, obviously, this is a report you're looking for, and like I said early on, there's a lot of different things in here.
Thank you, Superintendent Graff. So, monitoring the chat, some people have asked about this information, and again, I think it was shared that he's going to.
Go ahead, Christine.
No, that's okay. I think, I mean, honestly, there's a lot of different ideas out here. I had concerns at the beginning too about even trying to do some sort of a consensus, because I wasn't sure if people understood the same perspective. Are we ranking this? Are we, just saying we agree with this idea in theory, or are we, you know what I mean? So I guess I'll turn it to the commissioner to say, what would be most helpful for you if you have to take this report and do something with it?
Sure. I had a few different thoughts. First, I would say, one, I appreciate Sean just naming how he approached his balloting, because that was one of your questions, Christine, was getting hearing from people to talk, having them share perhaps why they had an enthusiasm for one of these ideas. I would ask people not to assign motivation to anyone other than themselves as to how someone approached their ballot, to know what they went into their ballot for or not. But you can obviously speak to your own approach to these points and to these ballots. I would say one of the things I appreciated about the agenda was talking about these as a series of recommendations. And then actually, let me back up to say they are all going to be part of a series of recommendations. Some are being recommended as is, as presented from the subcommittees. The others are being recommended, or that's the reading on the agenda, being recommended for further development. And I think that actually all of that gives us as the Department of Education work to do, right? It's all really productive work, meaning that some of these things are items that perhaps can be put into consideration soon, right away. Others can be put into consideration as we work on them, or as we work toward them, perhaps. I am reminded of reading the book about the Minnesota Miracle, as well as talking to Dr. Melcher about that. And I am reminded that while we can look back on the Minnesota Miracle and also think it was a point in time where a whole bunch of things happened to dramatically change school finance, that it actually it was over a series of years, 6 or so years it took to develop and then enact the Minnesota Miracle. And I absolutely appreciate those moments when we can change things on a dime. And I have a lot of respect for people who have the sort of vision to present, again, from what I see on the agenda, a series of recommendations that would say, here are some longitudinal things that deserve serious consideration, and to be able to take those at the Department of Education and productively work with each one of these ideas as they would come to us, feels like progress, quite frankly.
Well, I'm going to jump in one more time and just say, you know, I'm not willing to adopt any items without adopting our racial equity proposals as well. It sounds like people voted no because they had some real questions, and I would hope that we'd have time to answer those questions. I know we've been at this for a long time. I understand that, but I think this is critical to the work that we're doing on every front. Equity has to be first and foremost in my mind. So I'll leave that out there.
Can I jump in, John? I'm with Bernie about this, and I want to make sure we remember the context of the fact that we're in the middle of the pandemic, and we've never had this year a good opportunity to sit together in a room. I couldn't get us into the parking lot, where I thought it would have had a much more robust discussion, and we could have tackled that racial equity issue. And we just never had that discussion. You know, we had it within the subcommittee group, but never as a group, because we started running out of time. It seems to me like we don't have to be wedded to this 80% rule. Somehow or another, we should still be able to address these issues and get them into the report. This is not a constitutionally mandated election that has to be by majority or 80%. It's a work group, and we should be able to get all of these ideas into the report so that we can still move forward. But I'll tell you, one of the things that Bernie and I disagreed a bit on is the constitutional amendment on racial equity. And as I understand Minnesota Education's position was, it just takes too long if you have to do a constitutional amendment. And I'm going like, all right, I'm with you on that. So let's just get rolling. Why don't we do it now? Why don't we get it in this work group recommendation? We can find a way to put it into the report, even if it turns out not to have the 80% vote. But at least we can move it forward and keep that discussion moving, and we can get something considered. Thanks.
I'd like to throw in, I like what Don is saying. You know what I mean? One of the hesitations people have is putting their name behind a specific recommendation with maybe not understanding it or feeling like it should be given a priority. But if we think of this as, this is working groups and recommendations that came out of working groups and subcommittees from this working group, and they all have some valid in different kinds of ways. I guess I don't disagree with the idea that I think I was speaking to Sherry earlier today when I said, think about an anthology of issues, right? You know, a collection of deep dive investigations into different funding areas or areas that we see inequity in school funding in the state of Minnesota. I mean, I don't necessarily disagree that there has to be a vote and a consensus or an agreement. And I mean, I know I'm theoretically, Sherry and I are co-chairs, but I mean, all we are is just people who kind of look at it and go, I don't know, how should we organize this information? But I think that in the past, there's been consensus finding, there's been decisions made that way, but I don't think it has to be that way. I think it could certainly be, these are some issues that people brought forward and dove into and wanted to share their perspective on.
So I have go ahead, John.
I was just going to say, John Vento has his hand raised. He hasn't spoken yet, so I wanted to give him a chance.
Thank you, John. I, like Sean, kind of looked at this collectively about, you know, and I'll go back to Bernie's comments early in some of the subcommittees and some of the work groups outside of it, just discussion groups. If we don't ask for the money, we know we're not going to get it. So that's the first thing I want to put out there. I've been working down, you know, as a board member and previous to that. And one thing I've learned, if you don't ask down at the Capitol, you're not going to get anything. They can't read our minds or whatever. The other important thing is obviously getting on the same page with other organizations and making sure they were hearing a consistent message about education funding. So two factors that I kind of took in was, are we going to get widespread support across the state for all of these items? And I was pretty much strongly endorse with modification, because I believe if we don't ask for it, we're not going to get it. I do realize the understanding of needing a cut score, or however we want to describe it, to move forward. But again, that's that point in time, whereas we're dealing with the continuum. And I think the commissioner hit it right on the head about the Minnesota Miracle. It was a continuum with a vision that was funded over a period of time. as a board member who votes on these budgets monthly and annually, and sees the effects monthly, particularly really stark right now with the pandemic, I see, getting a 2 and 2, attaching to the formula to inflation, getting the special, the cross subsidies, unfunded mandates, that frees revenue up in a school district to invest in more equity work, in my mind. That's where I would be pushing those resources to make sure we're doing it. Having the state come in would be, thumbs up, extra bonus, extra resources for all of us. So I appreciate the idea that it's more of a continuum versus there's a point in time, we create the report, but then that continuum of conversation about how we address racial equity, how we're going to do it. Because a lot of these items are going to be on a lot of our legislators, as Representative Davnie shared, that some of those priorities are within the House. There's nothing to say they can't run with it. We don't know what the governor would do. But I do understand the necessity of coming up with a report of, and I don't know how to phrase it, or, because once we start changing that score to maybe go to 75%, maybe a quarter. I mean, how do we do that and go back and forth? And is that enough? But I also know simply, the 2.8 or $2.5 billion that these price tags that we've got from the runs, we know we're not going to get it this year. But again, if you don't ask, you're not going to get it. I support a lot of the equity pieces, but I also think that if we don't move forward with some recommendations, that could put us back, because there's ways I think we can do some of that equity work. And I think, as some people have said, through some of those changes within the formulas, getting some of the unfunded mandates addressed gives districts that flexibility.
All right, I'm going to go with that raised hands. Janie, I think you've had that up for a while. Did you have a comment still? And if not, I'm going to go to Kathy Erickson.
Thanks. I just wanted to follow up, and again, thank you all for your thoughtful comments. I just want to add that if we had all gotten the opportunity to just brainstorm and ask for everything we wanted, if you would have asked a pool of school finance folks, we would have added a whole bunch more, even beyond what's here. I tried to keep within the scope of the agendas and the case studies and the other things that came to mind that was processed here. So I appreciate we want to ask for everything and identify those things, but at the same time, I think there's many things that are not included here from a finance perspective that others would have wanted to include as well. So I feel like the reason there's maybe some hesitation is that there are things that could be fleshed out a little bit more. I guess then my only other suggestion would be that we include the scoring and the balloting. If we want to include all of the information, I think that it should show where people had maybe thoughts and concerns about, that there could have been maybe some more development, so that people understand the context of, that there were thoughts that went through this. And I realize that people voted maybe with different perspectives than others, but this, to me, when it says school finance, for those of us that are the school finance folks in schools, we share the same passion and heart. And similarly, I get very emotional thinking about the work we do. And so I just want to share that this is a very thoughtful thing for all of us. Thank you.
Okay, Amy Nelson.
So there's two things. One is I feel like we're in a little bit of a vacuum here because we don't have those comments. And to say, and the more I think about it, the more like endorse with modification, I feel like that needs to be at least a 2 ranking in all of this. Just because they're endorsed, but I don't know. So that's aside from that part, but I feel like we need those comments to really figure out where people's brains are on some of these things. The other thing is I don't feel that we as a group should put a % cutoff on here, because of the fact that if you put a % cutoff on there, then that's just a spot where the legislature looks at it and goes, oh, well, that's where they cut it off. All right, well, there we go. That's where we can cut the low hanging fruit. But to put it all together with the comments and I think the word was, somebody used anthology, put that all together and say, this is what we've found, you know, I think that's important. And then the last thing I'm going to say in this is I also think that if we're going to group together the pre-K, that there should be other things that are grouped together similarly as well. Otherwise, the pre-K shouldn't be grouped together in there, because I feel like to pull that one out and group it and not group some of the other similar things is putting that pre-K above, it's giving it a little bit more weight because it's the one that's grouped. Whereas I do agree that there's other things that could be grouped, maybe not together, but, you know, comparable enough like the pre-K is. So thanks for that.
Well, Amy, in terms of counting the endorsed with modification, the Likert scale gives it a 1, not endorsed is a 0, and endorsed is a 2, and strongly endorsed is a 3. So the Likert scale does count it.
Yeah, I mean, no, I know, but I recognize that, you know, it has to be counted in some way. But I feel like once we have the comments and see what those modifications are, you know, that's going to say that it was either more endorsed, like it was, yes, I like this, but it needs more, you know, if that was one of the comments, as opposed to like, yes, I like this, but it needs like true modification for me to get the endorsement. I think that I really want to see the comments on how that all shakes out, because I really would like to see where people's brains are with that. So I agree that, I mean, there has to be some way to rank it, so.
All right, well, I will put it over to our leaders. How would you like to move forward on this with the discussion as it's gone so far?
You've already heard my idea. I think we should write up all the report and Sarah, these are all the ideas that came forward. But again, for everyone who's looking to Sherry and I as co-chairs, we're pretty much members of the group too. All we're trying to do is problem solve how to maybe take a look at things. I am completely fine with not putting layers of endorsement and just, these are summaries of issues that came about, writing it up as if there's summaries of issues that we've uncovered this year. But that's me. I'm speaking for me.
You know, our group was given a task to look at the school finance system, bring it up to where it should be. We've lost a lot of ground in it over the years, as Tom has eloquently has shown us many times. As I voted on this, that was, you know, as someone in my role, I'm dealing with a budget all the time. I have 6 school districts. I'm working with the budgets. I'm working with the finance all the time. I see the basic revenue and I see what it's not covering. And I see all the competing needs for it. And our schools, many of our schools are working hard in these areas. So by covering some of that loss, by taking care of the special education subsidy, I just know the greater work that we can do. So I took that into account as well. You know, even because I'm hearing kind of a distinction between people who maybe are sitting in a business office in the school and crunching the numbers and those that are in a classroom, or just different lenses, if you will. You know, I think you can see that they were thinking, at least, I mean, the commissioner said, only think about yourself. I was thinking about equity, about how much more I could do if we didn't have that cross subsidy. The areas that seem to be, that didn't get as many votes, those were areas yet that we do have more work to do in. You know, we didn't know the exact number of school districts that might be involved. How it would integrate with existing teacher loans, for instance. We have federal programs for that. We have state programs for that. Is there going to be weaving together of that. How is that going to work? Because it's not just the work here, it's also redoing all of the legislation pieces that tie into this. So given that we've had a year to do this, yeah, we could write up exactly what we have now, because it would take months to flesh out some of the rest of these details. So that's kind of where I see we're at here. Do we write up just a summary of what we have, knowing that some of that isn't fleshed out, or where do we go from here? I'm not sure that was helpful, but
that's helpful. Just write it up, because we haven't had a chance to sit down together in person. Let's get it all in the report. That'll give Bernie a chance to get some, and with my support, by the way, some more additional comments. It gets in there. We're starting the process. We know what the problems are in this state. We've identified them. Everybody's opened my eyes to it. Let's deal with them. So it's time to roll forward. So if we get it all in the report, Commissioner can take it and the governor can take it, and then let the elected officials deal with it with all of our input. But keep it in the context that we've been in the pandemic and we've done great work of identifying all these issues. We know how to fix them. It's just we haven't figured out all the nuances, but at least we can move forward and start the process.
So what we could do is take a vote just on that new thought, like just to get everybody's thoughts on, should we just put everything as it is right now rather than putting them in different categories? Should we vote on a motion like that just to get people's sense, or do we even need to do that?
You could do a poll, John.
Okay. Jim has his hand up if you'd like to
Yeah,
speak.
thank you, John. I like the idea of moving forward with, in the vote you just suggested of the total report, as John was, Vento was talking about, John and John, I guess. But I want to provide folks some comfort, because there's some, if I'm tracking the conversation, there's a sense that some of the more racial equity oriented items had not been sufficiently filled out. And in fact, the work of the Coalition to Increase Teachers of Color and Indigenous Teachers in Minnesota, whatever their full and proper title is, has done all sorts of work and has a very robust documentation and set of proposals every year. So it wasn't done by this committee, by this group, but there's a robust fleshing out of those proposals there. And I look at the full service community schools, and again, there's a significant amount of academic research that supports that initiative. So the fleshing out may not have happened within this work group, but for a number of these racial equity issues, they've been fleshed out fully and well elsewhere.
Okay. Well, I'm going to put the poll up. I'll just see where people are at. I think we have 16 members here. We'll see who's all still online in order to vote. But we would just be saying yes or no to moving all the recommendations forward on the report without the distinctions that we've made so far, if that makes sense to everyone. So if there are no questions, I'll just launch that poll. We can see where people are at. If you cannot see the poll, you can just comment in the comment section, and we can get your.
And John, again, the motion is to put all of the ideas in the report.
Right.
That's just for clarification for anybody who's asking. Okay, thank you.
If you have to send a private message to me, yes or no, I can just add that. It looks like we have 16 votes, and that's the number of members. So I'm going to end the polling. And you can see we got 13 folks who agree with that idea. There are 3 that have some reservations about it.
I love how we all just sit here and look at John. Like, John, solve it for us. You know, Commissioner, I guess it comes down to you. I'm sorry to put you in that spot, but if we're going with the 80% rule, 81% said that, but I don't know. I don't know if there's a conversation you want to be having with some individual members for some follow-up after this, or how this wants to play out. But I do feel like you're the one calling this committee. You're the one asking for this report. I guess it comes down to what you want to see come out of it.
No, I appreciate that. My understanding was that these were all going to come as recommendations, and that there was a discussion tonight to bifurcate the recommendations to those that are ready and those that could deserve their own attention and their own build out. And I think the group brought itself through a discernment process that says that confirms, yes, they are all still recommendations. That's the word that was on the agenda. And I feel like this discernment process did confirm they were all still recommendations. There's just a block of recommendations now and not sort of coming in 2 different packages. Is that a fair way to characterize that?
I think so.
Okay, thanks.
But it's not just me. I feel like I'm the only one feeling the air here.
Right.
You got a thumbs up.
I saw some nods. Yeah.
Yep, some nods.
It's the extrovert in me. I can't handle the silence. I feel like I have to fill it.
Yeah, so if you disagree with that summary, you can certainly speak up. Knowing that we are coming down towards the end of the time that we have scheduled, I just wanted to go back to the agenda and look at some of the deadlines that we had on the agenda and see how those may have changed or not. But we planned on, from this, having a final draft out to members by Monday. So this scenario might just change how that looks, perhaps, than what has been done so far. But then any dissenting opinions might be submitted to me by that Wednesday of next week to be included. And then we would try to get a report officially submitted to the commissioner by November 5th. And we've originally decided to not have a meeting next week and move it to the 5th, which is 2 weeks from today. We just want to make sure that that schedule still works for everyone and it makes sense. And we're going to go forward with this outline, or if there are changes that need to be made.
And John, there may be edits people want to make, maybe not a dissenting opinion, but just, hey, would rather say it this way rather than that way. I mean, so I think we should welcome edits.
Yeah, so edits could be also sent to me by October 9th for sure. 29th.
So, and is it possible, because as you know, Amy said she'd like to see some of the comments. I mean, people have their own individual comments. So is that what we're going to go off of? Yes. If anybody wants to change those. Does that make sense?
Tamara, what are you asking for, Bernie? Because if we're not going to include a ranking system of sorts, I'm just trying to figure out what that.
Yeah, I suppose people have their own ballot and they should still have their own comments. So if they need to make any changes or other recommendations, they can do that. Is that true? That's what we're saying? Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're also saying that when you get the draft document on Monday, you have the opportunity to read through it and make any suggested edits to it that you would like.
And I think the draft document just has to reflect that this is a collection of investigations that happened into each of these pressure points, and recommendations aren't necessarily, virtually none of these recommendations are ranked or organized as such, but that they are a series of recommendations into each of the pressure points that exist in this current system.
Well, the one thing I would say is I think we did do the ranking, we did do the balloting. It needs to at least be in an appendix. I mean, it's a document that came from this committee. And so the fact that they're all in one group, notwithstanding, this and the comments were all made. The question is, do we put all the comments, because John has organized them and you can send those out tomorrow probably. Do we put those in as an appendix also? But this event happened. And what we decided was, no matter what the ranking, it was all going to go in as one recommendation. And so I think we need to put it as an appendix at least.
I guess the only challenge I would have to that is, it sounds like from some of the conversation we're having this evening that people fill the ballots out with a very different perspective about how to fill out the ballot. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm just saying that what I'm hearing is some people are saying, well, hey, if I thought about it that way, I would have responded differently in my ballot. And I get it. I mean, I get that there's always going to be people going back saying, wait a minute, I don't like the result, so let's go change the vote again. As long as we are all clear what that process is and that people agree on it. So I guess that's the only question I would put out there. I know in talking to different people who've called me, there's concern about, am I ranking these? Am I supposed to pick the things I most want or least want in comparison with each other? Or can I say hi to everything? But either way, I don't have a problem with it. I just don't want to be, I don't want us going back saying that somebody felt like they didn't have the same concept of that. Maybe I'm overthinking it.
Question, are the comments going to be put with the specific topic or just as a lump of comments? It would strike me to put the comments with each individual item so that there's some context to the issue. And, we didn't vote on accepting this whole chart. So I don't know if it should be in there or not.
Well, John organized the comments by pressure point. So all the comments about pressure point 1 were in a group. Okay. So they're organized that way.
These are also public documents, so I suppose anyone can also ask for them.
I say, what does Don McNeil think about it?
I think everybody should have an opportunity to get their comments in and affect how the final report looks. I mean, I know somebody else is doing the drafting, which I appreciate, but I've always thought that I get to put in a bunch of my own comments, and you probably already know my special interest, and I'm going to throw in my comments and I hope it makes the report. But if it doesn't make the report, you're going to see me at the legislature next year anyhow, and I'll be giving my 2 cents in front of the committee. So one way or the other, I'll still get heard.
Well, and a reminder, this report goes to the commissioner. The commissioner will then give it to the governor, and the governor will turn it over to the legislature. So that, our comments might not make it to that point. Our job is to produce something for the commissioner. So it sounds like, John, you're going to send out the comments. And yes, those are arranged nicely by PowerPoints or by pressure points. So it's pretty understandable the way they are laid out.
Yeah, if that's what we all want to do, we can certainly do that. I know we're getting down to we're past the time. Is there, are there any other decisions that need to be made or questions that need to be asked?
Can we just clarify, and I'm gonna, Mary Catherine, can you just clarify what you would like to see happen from here to the next meeting?
Well, I think we've got some next steps on the agenda. That there is, my understanding is the final draft will be prepared for me, and that we're going to, we'll pull together, there'll be an opportunity for others to weigh in on some of that drafting for the members of the working group to review. So I don't know if it makes most sense to just go through those next steps.
I just want to be really clear what the next steps will be like. So if people are going to weigh in, how do comments from that are now newly made between now and next time get put into the report or not put into the report?
We're going to have a deadline, I would assume, right? Of maybe next week, and then they can be put into the report. So it's all ready by the 5th. Is that true?
I guess I misunderstood. I thought you meant the comments already collected on the ballot. Are you talking about a new round of
That's what I'm clarifying.
collecting? Okay.
So if you're saying that we're just gonna, the comments collected already on the ballots are gonna go into the report, I just want to be clear about that. So people don't walk away today not clear about what would be the best way to go here.
Do people have the opportunity, the question that came up earlier was people having the opportunity to amend their comments. Is that something that's allowed, or is that the comments that are there now stand? That's, I think, the question.
Perfect. John, I suggest you put it to a vote.
Okay.
I love what you just said, Eugene. Say it again.
Do the comments that they exist now stand, or do people get an opportunity to amend their comments?
Perfect.
Could we also just allow people to write in a response that they want added to the report, or a statement that they want added to the report?
I like that motion better. The motion to expand on your comments after we see the report on Monday, we should be able to send an email in with additional comments expanding on our, whatever we did on our ballot.
An amendment.
Yeah.
It could just be, the question could be, are additional comments going to be accepted after you see the draft report?
Okay, that's good.
One thing I'd like to suggest here, this is Tom, is under the next steps here, you've got a section, the second bullet says dissenting opinions submitted to John Gimple by October 29th, but I don't think this is necessarily dissenting opinions. What I'm hearing is it could be concurring opinions, it could be positive comments. It's just, I think it's probably comments or opinions submitted.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Right. However people want to amend their ballot is basically what comments are on your ballot. If you want to add additional comments, should that be okay? That's our yes or no vote. Should we accept additional comments?
Presumably that could be new things that you have now thought about after you read the draft report that might be something that wasn't.
And one thing, when John took the comments, when I did the balloting, we didn't identify who voted or what were the comments. I'm taking this to mean that Don McNeil will sign it. This is Don McNeil's comments. And so then we're free to put it in the report because it's your comments, you're putting an authorship to them. And so that's the difference to me between what you did before and what you're proposing to do now.
I think we should make it really clear. Does everybody agree with that? Additional comments is one piece of it. Additional comments with your name attached. Don't you think those should be asked 2 separate questions?
They are 2 separate questions.
Okay, take it away, John.
All right, so the first question is, should we allow additional comments in addition to those you put on your ballot? So the poll is launching now. I have 15 votes. I'm not sure we still have 16 folks with us. So, oh, there's 16. Okay, here we go. We're in the polling. That was a significant majority there. So now we can say, should the additional comments added to the report have names attached to them? Is that basically the question? Should we attach names to the comments? I can relaunch that. Looks like still one person has not voted, but I'll give you just a few seconds to do that. We have 15 out of 16. There we go. Still have 75% on that, so I'll share that with you as well. So there's a majority, but some people may not be up on having their name attached. At the same time, these are public documents, as we've all shared in the past, so even the ballots could be asked for. So we at least have that information. We can do with it, leaders can decide what they want to do with that information. Is there anything else we want to know from the folks before we separate?
So just, what's the final timeline now? We'll get that draft tomorrow, the 26th, or?
Should get the draft on the 26th. We can still make that happen. And then all comments or opinions or even dissenting opinions can be, will need to be to me by October 29th.
I will say I appreciate the conversation tonight. Thank you, everybody. I know it's not easy, and I know we've been at this a long time, but it's important work, and our names are on it.
They are. I agree.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bernie, for saying that.
Okay. Any other comments from anyone?
Thank you, everyone, for your work. And I know this hasn't been an easy time. And meeting in this format makes it even that much more difficult. So thank you.
Great. All right, then with that, I think we'll adjourn the meeting, and we'll see everybody next time.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Thank you all.
Right.
Night.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.